You ready? Okay, it is 6 o'clock. We will call this meeting of the Mayor and Board of Aldermen to order. Ms. Braggs, would you come up and start us off with the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Braggs, can I give you this? This is a City of LaBelle pin we'd like to give you. Thank you for doing that for us.
Thank you.
Alderman Piper, could you lead us in an invocation, please?
Yeah. Before our prayer, I'd like us to take a moment of silence for the victims of the tragedy in Collierville that occurred last week and for their families. Thank you. Let us pray. Dear God, we thank you for this wonderful day you created, the glory of it, Lord. We thank you for this time to come together, and we ask for your guidance in leading this city. We thank you for those who are here, and we ask that you would be with all of us as we're here in this time together, that you would bless this time. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Before we approve the agenda, Doc, we got an award the other day, and Doc went and accepted it for us. He just wanted to tell us a little bit about it and present it.
Yeah, real proud of this, and I appreciate the opportunity to represent the city at this. And what I'm showing you is a plaque that we received the last week of September, and every year our Veterans Unit, Veterans Affairs, has an event honoring our veterans here in the county. And this year, in addition to all of our veterans, they also honored 5 of our Purple Heart heroes here in our county. And in addition to that, DeSoto County, through the work of our Veterans Affairs, became the first county in the state of Mississippi to become a county where all cities in the county are now noted as Purple Heart cities. And we accomplished that through the work of our Veterans Affairs, whatever they had to do to get us there. But every city at the event received a plaque, and this, of course, is the plaque Hernando got. They were all alike. So each city now in DeSoto County is recognized as a Purple Heart city, and we're the only county, as I mentioned, in the state of Mississippi that has that distinction. So this is for the public. It's, again, it's the same time every year. The last week in September, it's held out at the Olive Branch Country Club. It's open to the public. You don't have to be a veteran to attend, so please put that on your calendars and show up next year. I'm going to lay this on the table over here, and you guys can come by and look at it if you'd like to.
Thank you for being there to accept that. Okay, from the agenda I sent out on Friday, I have added one item, which is to hire a director of planning. So if y'all could approve that agenda with that amended item, I would appreciate it.
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That motion passes. Need a motion to approve the docket of claims.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the docket of claims listed in the agenda.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That motion passes. Next is to approve the minutes from the regular Mayor and Board of Aldermen meeting on September 21st.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Next is to approve the minutes from the special meeting of the Mayor and Board on October 1st.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no.
Nay.
And that motion carries. Next is the consent agenda. Do we have a motion on the consent agenda?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The consent agenda carries. BJ, if you would come up and present the planning item we have tonight. Just so y'all know, we normally have the planning items on our second meeting of the month. but BJ is going to be absent that day, so we were able to get this one moved up so it could be taken care of.
First off, let me say, I did set at each of your places a map. I just got this afternoon by email, and it's simply a revised landscape plan that, gives you the layout of the mini storage facility and the landscaping that they're proposing. Couple of things I would like to mention about this application. This, of course, is the proposed mini storage on the northeast corner of, the northwest corner of US Highway 51 and the entrance road to Renaissance Park. The first thing I want to mention is the fact that since the Planning Commission meeting, the original request was for a 20-foot variance. Basically, the buffer yard would be 10 feet wide, which would be a variance of 20 feet. Since that time, apparently more detailed engineering has been done, and at this point in time, the buffer yard is actually 19.25 feet wide, which makes it a variance of 10.75 feet. So it's a smaller variance than what was originally requested. Essentially what we're dealing with here is Article 10 of the city's zoning ordinance, table of buffer yard requirements, states that the width of the required buffer yard between a development in a C4 district, which is the zoning of the subject property, and an adjoining R10 zoning district shall be 30 feet in width. Now, the park, although this is the boundary line, excuse me, although this is the boundary line adjoining the park itself is zoned R10 single-family residential. That's why the 30-foot buffer yard comes into play. The buffer yard requirements do not make a distinction between what the actual use of the property is. It is strictly based on what the zoning designation of that property is. The Planning Commission reviewed this at their last meeting. And they voted unanimously to recommend denial of this request based on the findings that are listed in your staff report under proposed motion to deny. One thing that I did want to clarify that came up at the Planning Commission meeting, there was a lot of discussion about, because the buffer yard is based on zoning, there was a lot of discussion about that topic, in terms of what was the zoning, what had been the zoning, so forth. The applicant was of the opinion that the zoning of the park had, at least at some point, been C4, planned commercial, like the corner lots. Therefore, only requiring a 10-foot buffer yard, which would put them in compliance. And that was based to a certain extent on a copy of the zoning map that does actually show the park as being C4. We went back and checked all the files and all the records, and essentially what we found was that the park has never been zoned C4. It was originally zoned R10, and when the bank took it over, as part of the deal of transferring the park to the city agreed to go along with rezoning the two corner lots to C4. But the park itself has always remained R10. So there has been no difference. This 30-foot buffer yard has always been the requirement. So with that clarification, I have given you the applicant's responses to the 4 criteria as well as the staff's comments concerning the 4 criteria. I've also given you a proposed motion for denial based on the findings of the Planning Commission. And I've also given you a proposed motion concerning approval if you should decide to overturn the Planning Commission on this matter. And of course, you have the ability to table the item if you feel like you need additional time to consider it, or if you feel like you need additional information on the matter. So that's my report, unless anyone has any questions.
Does anyone have questions for Mr. Page?
So your research affirmed that the applicant was in error when he stated that it had been rezoned.
Right.
And with that being said, as it relates to the western boundary line,
Yes.
what would be the biggest difference if the western boundary line was granted and not the northern? I might need to ask that of Mr. Smith, I may.
Well, first off, just so we can be clear on this point, the variance request only deals with the western property line. The northern property line has well over 40 feet from the boundary line to the proposed location of the buildings. So it's fine, as far as, that's not part of the variance request. It's only on that western side next to the park where they desire to place the buildings closer than the 30-foot required. Now, let me mention one other thing. The reason I gave you that revised landscaping plan was because, again, the issue of landscaping is not part of this variance request either. It strictly has to do with the width of the buffer yard. The landscaping that they are proposing in terms of the number of trees, the kind of trees and so forth, all would comply with our ordinance requirements. Okay?
Any other questions for Mr. Page?
So you mentioned they referenced some kind of zoning map
Yes.
at some point. Where did they get that document?
Actually, the one that we have in the office downstairs, the one on the wall there, right by the conference room, it actually shows the park as being C4. But as I said, when we went back and reviewed the files, we can find no indication that that property was ever zoned C4. So my opinion is that the map is in error and needs to be corrected.
And at some point on that topic, we probably need to update the zoning map, make sure it's correct, and then officially adopt it, so we know where everything is, and we have an official copy of the zoning map.
But like I said, when the properties on the corners were rezoned to C4, the park was still zoned R10. And like I said, we found no indication of any application or action by the Planning Commission and the board that would have changed the zoning of the park.
Is there anyone else that was here to speak on that topic today?
I know the applicant's here.
Yes, sir.
I was at the planning commission when they denied it unanimously. I'll just kind of keep this brief since we have a lot of people here to speak. The park is already not very visible from the road. No signage advertising the park's location. Now they're planning to put a giant building in front of it, blocking it even further. Furthermore, the owner wants to remove any sort of barrier between the two. If the city allows this, they're doing a huge disservice to the Parks Department they claim to care so much about. If the owner had done his research when originally purchasing this property, he would have noticed the issue. He agreed to the original terms. I see no reason to change them. I think the only reason why he's trying to do this is because there's a new board, there's a new commission, and he's trying to see what he can slip by.
Okay.
That's just my opinion, though.
Thank you for your comments. Did you say Mr. Burrows is here?
I think Mr. Smith is here.
Oh, yeah. Would one of y'all like to speak to it? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'm Ben Smith, 2700 Stone Brook in Nesbit, and if I could, I got some handouts, if I could hand out,
Sure,
please.
certainly.
I have 11 of them, so I hope.
Kristen, could you hand those out for him? If you don't mind. Okay, I think we've all got them.
Okay. I think it's important that we talk a little bit about what happened, kind of the history behind this project, and what leads to us asking for a variance tonight. The zoning map that's been referred to by BJ is the first document that you look at. I have circled the park area, and I've also, in black, showed you the lot that is in question tonight, the mini storage lot. So you see that your map, if you go on the GIS website, this was printed off the GIS website. So it shows that all of that property is on C4. In a C4 district, mini storage is not a permitted use. You have to get a conditional use to put a mini storage site in. And the second sheet I've given you, although it says C2, you don't have a C4. This is the same as C4. But as far as permitted and conditional uses, you can see that I've underlined the conditional uses, and many warehouses are conditional use. And if you drop down a little bit, you'll see that when you apply for a conditional use, the Planning Commission may attach any, to their approval, anything, but not limited to lighting, screening, and landscaping. And also, when you file your conditional use application, you must file a development plan with it. Now, we had meetings with Mr. Briley at that particular time about this project. There was no mention whatsoever that the property was incorrect, which should be R10, not C4. So at that time, we did not know that the property was actually zoned R10. So we applied for a conditional use for a mini storage. The next display that you see is the site plan that we filed. And if you notice the western building, if you look at your north arrow on the left-hand side, we applied for a conditional use for a mini storage, and we actually showed that western building being on the property line. We did not even show the 10-foot. It was approved by the Planning Commission for, the mini storage was approved at that site, and RV storage at that site, with the requirement that we put a 10-foot buffer between the western building and our property line. So at that particular time, the Planning Commission and the applicant, Mr. Burr, everybody concerned, still thought the property was on C4 next door. So, but it does require 10 foot, so it was approved and it said you put a 10-foot buffer. So when we got the conditional use, Mr. Burr bought the piece of property because he had the conditional use. He knew he had to give up 10 feet on that western line. The next step in the process that you file for a certificate of development, and that's the next document that you see. Mr. Briley died on December the 14th. This conditional use occurred in November. And we filed our certificate of development after we got conditional use with 10-foot site plan being approved with 10 foot. Then Mr. B.J. Pay comes on board, and I get a phone call from him one day and says, lo and behold, I have found records that property next door is not zoned C4. It is actually R10. And he's correct. The property has never been zoned. It's always been R10. We had no idea that the property was on R10. If you go to R10, I included a chart. Next chart that you see is your buffer yards requirement. You'll see if the property is zoned, both of them zoned C2 or C4, the same, as only requires 10 feet. And that was what was approved already by the Planning Commission on that development plan that was filed. So we had an approved site plan when we filed the certificate of development. Mr. Page said, no, it's 30. You have to have 30. So we filed a variance application. We thought due to the hardship that we had no idea. Your planning department at that particular time had no idea that the property was still R10. We were never told that it was zoned. It was never zoned. The property has always been R10. Mr. Burr, actually, his company actually bought the property with only a 10-foot buffer being required. So when we found out it was 30-foot, we requested a variance. And this is when we went before the Planning Commission, I don't know, maybe a month ago or so. And that next document you look at, it's in color, and you see the building, the western building's kind of a yellow-orange looking building. We asked for a variance there. Actually, at the top, you see that we requested 15 foot between the property line and the building there. We also agreed at that time that we would go ahead and construct that building. I'll tell you why in just a minute. But that future building, we told them we'll go ahead and build that building now when we build the other buildings. But we requested 15 foot, and we said we would put the same number of trees, the same number of pine trees, the same number of oak trees that's required. Even when it's 30 foot, we'll still put the same number of landscaping items. We're not going to short the buffer, just the width of the buffer. That was turned down. So we're here tonight, we hope with a compromise that you can agree with, and Mr. Burr can proceed on with his development tonight. If you'll fold this sheet out, this is what we'd like to propose to you tonight as a compromise. If you look on the left-hand side, you see the building. We shortened that building 5 feet. Instead of being 55 feet deep, we took 5 feet out of the building, made it 50 foot. If you look in the middle of the drawing, you see a couple drawings there. They're darker than the other print. On the left-hand side, you'll see that that's the required buffer, which is 30 foot wide. Same number of trees, your deciduous trees, and then your pine trees. And what's required in that 30-foot buffer is a 6-foot wall, masonry wall. I show you the height of a man standing next to the wall, a 6-foot individual standing next to the wall, so give you some concept of what the buffer would look like. On the right-hand side is what we're proposing tonight. If we could reach a compromise, we think we have a hardship. Mr. Burr sure thinks he has a hardship. What we want to require is that the buffer be 19.25 feet wide, same number of trees, no shorting the trees. We will go ahead and construct that building now, and the back wall of that building is 16 foot tall. So instead of a 6-foot wall, you're now going to have a 16-foot wall with all the required trees. If you go back, if you're out in the park, and if you go to, let me back up 1 or 2 drawings. If you back up to the one that shows the building in yellow or orange, you'll see that the fence in the park is not on the property line. So if you add between the fence and the building, especially on the north, you have over 30 feet of grass between the fence and the proposed building. Although Mr. Burr does not own it, it is grass. It is a buffer. So in reality, in the real world, you have 30 feet of buffer between the fence and the building. If you're curious to what it will look like, I provided you 2 color renderings there to give you an idea of what the buffer would look like and the buildings would look like. For some reason, let me see if I have those. For some reason, I don't have them. One of them is a night view, and the other one's a daytime view of the building. The first one is a night view. You can see that the building on the left-hand side there is, you see some RVs, motorhomes backed into the building. That's why it's 16 foot tall. You need a 13-foot clearance on the front to back a motorhome in there. So the building at the back is 16 foot tall, including the roof. So now we got a 16-foot wall, and we got a roughly 30 feet between the fence and the building. We think this is a good compromise. Mr. Burrow was innocent throughout this. It's unfortunate this occurred also, by the way, this is when COVID was happening. And we had meetings put off, and it was a tough time. But we're asking you tonight, Mr. Burrow, and is asking you tonight to agree to this. We think it's a great compromise. You get what you need, you're actually getting we think it's a better buffer. But we do need the variance on the width only. The material, the trees will be there. I'll answer any question you may have, but I've been doing this since in the 70s, and I've always relied on those zoning maps. I've never gone to the zoning office and said, let me see the one you have. And if I'd have been told or alerted to that property was R10, obviously I wouldn't be up here tonight. But this does put a hardship, a very bad hardship on Mr. Burke. I'll answer any questions you may have here.
Any of y'all have a question?
Mr. Smith, where is a park in this rendering here? Where is a park? The park
The
over
park's
here?
on your left.
Yeah, so this is the fence for the dog park, is that what that is?
That is the Renaissance Drive right there.
Okay, I got
That's Renaissance Drive.
it. So the park's over here.
Yeah, the park's over there. In that drawing, and I think it's to the north on the second drawing, on the second rendering.
Any
If
other
you're in the
questions?
park looking, excuse me, if you're in the park looking towards the mini storage, you're gonna see oak trees and pine trees, and behind that is a 16-foot masonry wall. You're not gonna see any of the vehicles, the noise won't be there, so it's a excellent buffer.
Any other questions from Mr. Smith?
So this is Highway 51 in this drawing?
That is Highway 51.
So you're gonna be on 51?
No, I'm sorry, that's Renaissance Drive, that
Yeah,
is the
but-
entrance.
yeah.
That's the wall, the building that we're talking about right
Okay.
there. It's 16 foot tall at the back.
Any other questions? Mr. Page, did you want to say anything else?
No,
Okay.
I think I've said everything I want to say.
The last time, by the way, the last time that map was, last time that the zoning map was amended was on 10/16/2018, was the last time that y'all amended this map.
Okay.
It was amended then, and it's still in error? Is that what you're saying?
It's still in
It was
error.
amended in 2018, but it's still in error?
It was in error in 2018, and it's still in error today.
Any other questions?
So there's no, you're not disputing that it's an R10 zoning, correct?
We're not disputing that at all. After we were told by Mr. Page it's R10, but at that time, Mr. Burrow had already bought
Yes, sir.
the property with, thinking that it was, and had not been told otherwise until after he purchased the property. We then, this is a ninth inning ball game, we're in the eighth inning when we find out, hey, the map's wrong. Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir. If you'd come up to the podium with your question.
Just real quick, so when that was purchased, did you not know that there was a park behind there?
You have to address the board, not
Oh,
him. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So when that was, I just wanted to know if, when it was purchased, if he did not know, it's pretty obvious there's a park back there. And if that's C10, if he's been doing it since the 70s, he should have known, or maybe he didn't know that there was a 30-foot buffer there. That's just my
Okay.
only question.
Okay, thank you. You don't have to answer that question, but you may, Mr.
Well, did
Smith.
we know there was a park there? Obviously, we knew there was a park there. And according to your zoning map, we knew it was zoned commercial. As Mr. Page says, it's how you use a particular piece of property. You can have a park in a commercial zone.
Sure.
So with the park being there in zone commercial, it did not throw up any red flags at all.
Okay. Any other questions from this board? Or if not, is there a motion? Somebody want to make a motion?
Here, I'll make a motion. I make a motion to overturn the action of the planning commission and approve a zoning variance for Jim Burrow Hernando Self-Storage 2, owner of the property, to allow construction of a new self-storage facility, providing a 19.25-foot wide buffer yard along the western property line of the subject site rather than the required 30 feet wide buffer yard, a variance of 10.75 feet. The subject property is identified as 3331 U.S. Highway 51 South, parcel number 3086-240.000-00013.02, a 5.70 acre tract located on the northwest corner of U.S. Highway 51 and the entrance road to the city's Renaissance Park in Section 24, Township 3 South, Range 8 West, based upon the following findings. And as part of the findings, I include items A, B, C, and D, as shown in the staff report.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second to that motion? Would anyone like to offer a second?
Second.
There's a second from Alderwoman Ross. We'll have a roll call vote.
Alderwoman Ross,
Nay.
Alderman Piper,
Nay.
Alderman Harris,
Yay.
Alderwoman Lynch. Nay. Alderman Miller. Alderman Robinson,
Nay.
Alderman Wicker.
Nay.
So that motion failed. Is there another motion from this board?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to uphold the denial of zone variance by the Planning Commission requested for Jim Burrow of Hernando Self-Storage, 2, owner of the property, to allow construction of a new self-storage facility providing a 10-foot, I think that's a misprint, a 19.25-foot wide buffer yard along the western property line of the subject site, rather than the required 30-foot wide buffer yard, a variance of 10.75 feet. Subject to A, B, C, D in the report.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second from Alderwoman Lynch. We'll have a roll call vote.
Alderman Robinson,
Aye.
Alderman Wicker,
Aye.
Alderman Ross,
Aye.
Alderman Piper,
Aye.
Alderman Harris,
Nay.
Alderwoman Lynch, Aye. Alderman Miller.
No.
Okay, and the motion to deny passes. We will move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. After a long wait, we have item number 10 on here is the approval to hire Kendra Cobb as our planning director at the rate of $78,000 with a start date on or before October 18th.
So move.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. We now have a new planning director in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is item number 11. The Rotary Club has asked us to proclaim October 7th of this year as Hernando Rotary Day. Could I have a motion to that effect?
Motion approved.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. Next was the discussion of street repairs and overlays, and Joe Lauderdale has put together a starting point list that I think was in your packet, and he is here to address that topic.
Okay. You asked at the last meeting that I come back with some streets. And I produced that list right there. I think this year it does include some crack seal streets. We were going to do some last year and things just didn't work out. Other things got put ahead of that, but you can see some of those streets there. And certainly if you've got other streets you need me to look at, look at that. And then come back with some cost of those streets, if that's the streets you want me to look at.
to make note of one on here, down near the bottom, it says Oak Grove Road and Robertson Gin Road. Those, it's a portion of Oak Grove Road from the highway to Robertson Gin, and then it goes down Robertson Gin. That is a state aid road. I talked to the county road manager, and that is on their list for next spring or summer. So they'll be handling that overlay.
Fourth one from the bottom.
Yes. Mhm.
That kind of the old board, I mentioned that to them last year, and of course, wanted to mention to the new board that the county, they're gonna do some streets inside the city that they promised last year to do, so kind of wanted you to know about that.
So, so, just for the board, to make sure the board don't, that this is not an all-inclusive list, this is just a beginning list to start on. And this beginning list that you proposing to start on tonight is based upon looking at the road plan and also on your expertise. So these are the, in no particular order on this list, and also that these are the first 18, 19 to include the county road that we'll look at first, and then in future meetings, other roads could be brought to your attention and added to. Am I correct?
That's correct. And then also, I'm going to show you some costs, projected costs, so you'll know that the streets aren't equal as far as
Right.
cost-wise.
But there again, we'll have a bottom line for these 18 to include the seal and the county, that at that time with your projection, and then whatever else roads that the board advise you of, then we at least have a number to go with the $1.2 million, know where we might be standing at and left.
That's correct.
I went through my Ward 5 and just assessed all the roads and which ones had never been any type of overlay, and made a list of just where some repairs could be made, and then some possibly, some overlay that had never happened, like in Edgewood, Edgewater. Lee Summit Drive is in very bad shape. All the way through, it's very heavily traveled. Monteith is in bad shape over there. I mean, I've got a list, not to have to, take up the time to go through all of it, and I can, type it up to where we can add it to the list. And, we can put it in order, not that my area is any more favored than anyone else's. I'm just saying, we can put it, you can look at it and see which ones are in dire need of repair first and put them in an order of, necessity first, and then, because a lot of these have never been resurfaced.
Okay.
And they're in bad shape and crumbling throughout Ward 5.
You'll get me that list. I did leave off Monteith. It's going to have something done.
Joe Frank, did you happen to use, as a guide, the Civil Link maintenance plan that they gave us, where they listed all of our streets and the conditions of our streets?
I did.
That was a guide you used to put this list together?
Yes. We've pretty well taken care of all the threes. We've taken care of 90% of the fours. That's the ratings of the lowest. And we're up into some fives now. There's a couple of sixes on there, but if we'll just take Lake Grove Drive and Katy Cove back there. Obviously, 2018, they rated a 6. Today, they would rate a 4. So definitely that's one that's really made a change, that area right there. But I did go by the book to
Thank you.
see that.
What portion of Old Highway 51 and Memphis Street is this? Because I know it kind of starts and stops.
When you leave the underpass there and you veer off and start going,
Okay, that's what I thought.
there. I've been asked about that street, and it's a
Yeah.
little,
It needs some
it's,
repair.
needs something, we'll say.
So, obviously, the two factors, just the two largest factors are money and time. Is this in your estimation, is this a list that we can complete over the next 12 months, given the money and time that we have? Or is it an unreasonable list? I mean, I know it's hard to estimate or ballpark at this point.
Yes, over 12 months, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Next 2 or 3 months, may not be able to get anybody to do some of it because of weather and because
Right.
contractors are booked up, but certainly need to get started on it.
And when we look, sorry, and when we look at the crack seal specifically, I know that's on several of these. That should extend the life of these the life of these streets as they currently exist for 3 to 5 more years. Is that about right?
That's the plan.
Okay.
Now, some of that crack sealing can be done between, it can be done before we can do overlay.
Mm-hmm.
We can do crack seals as long as it's not water in the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But Joe Frank, we put 1.2 million in our budget for street overlays. You think you can do all of these streets for that 1.2 million?
probably not.
Well, I thought that was your question, but if not, how deep into this list do you think we can go?
I'm just gonna have to come up with a number for you on every street.
And to further answer that question, if we go down 2 or 3 items on this list, we're going to be accepting the bid for motor scooter Old Highway 51. That was on last year's list, but it's just now getting done, so that will be out of this current
Right.
new budget.
Right.
So we'll be taking up either 200 or 600,000, depending on how y'all vote on that.
And then also we got to factor in, even though we're saying within a 12-month period in timeline, we got to look at the revenue stream also as relate to the roads also. So I think what we were saying back at the end of the day that Joe got to come back with a proposed number. Then once we get the proposed number, then we'll be better able to look at and judge on where we need to go. So we got the proposed number, then we got the fund as they come in.
So as y'all give more names of streets, like Alderwoman Ross was talking about, Joe can put a price next to each one of them. And so we'll come back with a longer list with numbers next to it of his estimated overlay price, and then we can make a better decision.
Does everyone on the board have the Civil Link study from 2018? Does everybody have a copy?
I do not.
Did you not
I
get
do
yours?
not.
I've got a hard copy for you back here in the office.
So just for example, so I went through a couple neighborhoods in Ward 6, and based on the 2018 estimates that they gave, added them up to understand to get this neighborhood done, what would that figure be? Which would be another way to potentially do this. But I understand you want to try to meet the most pressing needs as well. But sometimes to get an entire neighborhood where it would need to be according to Civil Link a few years ago, it may be $60,000 for one neighborhood. So that's something to take into consideration as well, that if you have a continued issue, you have longitudinal and latitudinal lines running through the streets all through a neighborhood, try to address those as best we can while they're at that one location, if that makes any sense, to make our dollars go a little farther potentially. So I would just ask that be a consideration as we're going forward.
But at the same time, we got to make sure that we can't just spend all that money and time at one neighborhood also. That
Yes, sir.
means we're going to have to delay it, don't let it be a political decision based upon the expert opinion from the engineer along with that book.
Yes, sir.
And generally, what we do is we'll get these bid out probably in January. If we can all come to an agreement of what the list is going to be, we'll accept bids, and then we'd be better off getting one big bid for a package, and then they would pave them sometime in the spring or summer as they got to them. And usually when they move in, they do them all at once. It wouldn't be piecemeal.
I just want to make sure we're in a position where we're not looking in August at our budget, and we hadn't spent $100,000 of our overlay money and hadn't spent anything.
That's right.
Basically and I know there was COVID and different factors that played into that, but we've got to invest in our streets. I think everybody's on board with that, it's just a matter of doing it.
And then with the crack seal, in relation to that, the crack seal, that's gonna be based on, and Joe Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, that's gonna be based on whether or not when that company can come in, because we tried to get them last year, but we couldn't get them in, they would not come back. So that's another factor, when you're talking about the crack seal. So number one is dealing with the weather, and then on too many companies do the crack seal, so we gotta make sure, look at their schedule, and try to build around their schedule to try to get some of these crack seals done at the same time. Now, Alderman Piper, that is when they're in the area, because I think like South Haven and Horn Lake were doing some when we got them one time. So when they're in the area, they would come not only just in a particular part of the city, but as long as they're in the county somewhere. So we got several factors that we're gonna have to look at, but the biggest factor right now is to let him proceed with the list and give us some prices and some bids back.
Yeah, I think if we can be just as, to your point, we can be as, shovel ready as possible or as project ready as possible. That's the goal of, kind of this exercise here for sure. I did have a question about the soccer complex, and I know that there's design elements and other things. Is there a timeline as far as how that would come along as far as the design and what the estimated
I
cost?
think I'm working through it like on this list right here to be able to come back pretty quick on that.
Okay.
One thing about on the paving now, I have small contractors who like to do small jobs and give us good prices on one street at a time or two streets at a time. And then, of course, the big contractors, they like to do several streets at one time to be able to give me a good price. So that's a factor too.
We'll rely on your judgment to advise us as we move forward on that then.
So when should we get these bids back, or estimates?
Sir?
When should we get these estimates back on each street?
I should be able to come up with some of the numbers. Let me see on this other list, but
My list is a little thorough.
okay.
Some of them can be some repairs too, though.
Yeah,
And you're going to maybe take out a section and repair it versus total overlay, but some of them need total overlay.
I agree.
When do you think you might get us some numbers back?
I'll try to get some numbers back by next meeting.
Okay.
Some of them.
Any other discussion on that topic before we move on? Okay. If there is none, we will move on to item 13. I'm going to turn this over to City Clerk Pam Powell and have her explain this item to you.
Well, at this time, we do POs for everything, $5, doesn't matter. So I think that it would be better to do $2,500 and under, no POs. And if you do $2,500 or over, you do a PO. If you get to $5,000, you need 2 estimates to go with that. And then, of course, if you get to $50,000, you're gonna have to bid. And this will be a good purchase policy that department heads can maintain their own budget, which they do anyway. They send in the codes, you put it anyway. So there's no reason to do POs for anything under $2,500, in my opinion. So I think this purchase policy will free them up and they don't have to wait. Yeah.
And this is all in accordance with state purchasing law.
It is. And it even outlines some, sole source providers, term bid contracts, you still would need to do POs on your items that are over $2,500 and just stay in that area.
This was one of the first things that our city clerk asked me about when she took off. She's like, why in the world are these people coming in here 50 times a day for little POs? And it's just, it's just not very efficient.
It's not efficient.
It's,
No.
based on your past experience, do other cities have a policy similar to this?
Yes. Yes.
And we just wanted to adopt this as the official purchase policy, so all the department heads would adhere to it,
Yes.
and Pam could enforce it.
Yes.
What percentage of, if you had to estimate, you may know this number already because you're that good, but what percentage of purchases are less than $2,500?
Well, I do POs probably, I would say, about an hour a day total, just throughout the day. They come. It takes just a little time to do that. And they're in the $100 sometimes, most of the time, $100, $500, $60, $40.
Time
Sure.
consuming.
Yeah, it's time consuming and it's just not necessary.
So you think it's a large percentage of them that are the small ones?
Yes, yes. But, they do POs for everything, so it's hard to say.
Right.
So this would increase your efficiency as well as the department efficiency?
Mine and the department head, yes, yes.
Because the department heads and their staff waste a lot of time having to walk
Yes.
over to,
Right.
and
Yeah.
Pam's at lunch, or, they're just trying to get the PO, slows
Right.
people down as well.
They fill out a form to send to me, and then I fill out a PO form in this system, so it's double duty.
And the reason I asked that question is just because if there was a specific reason for that figure, or if it's $1,000, if it's at $1,000, it's 89% of the purchases, and at 2,500, it's 96%, or what? Like, I didn't know if it was that
No,
broken down, or
it's not. You could make your limit, up to 5,000 if you wanted. But we thought 2,500 would be good for them to at least start with, and we'll see how it works out. It should be fine.
Any other questions or a motion?
Mayor, at the approval of the city clerk, at the recommendation of the city clerk, I make a motion to approve the city of Hernando purchasing policy.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That motion passes. Next is the approval of the DeSoto County Literacy Council 2-year lease at the Gale Center for $600 a month beginning November 1st, and authorize me to sign that lease. I think our attorney prepared a lease to make sure it's right, and so he has approved the lease. The main thing y'all have to know is it'll be a 2-year lease at $600 a month. And quite frankly, that figure is probably a little under market rate, but I think this board has to take into consideration the benefit to the entire community that the Literacy Council does by being here and serving our population.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the contract, allow you, and authorize you to sign it.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Alderman Piper. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That motion passes. Next is the approval of the Christmas lighting agreement, and authorize Gia to sign that on our behalf.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That motion passes. Next is the approval of the quote for the pipe for Brook, Cove from Forterra Pipe. Joe, you want to talk about that real quickly and explain what we're doing there?
Okay, Brook Cove, been dealing with a drainage issue over there for several years. So we decided to look at that and come up with a plan. And so, because of the materials that we need as far as pipe and the difficulty it is to get material nowadays, you're seeing there a quote on the pipe that would be needed for that job. And then, of course, if we move forward with the job, then we would get quotes on someone to put the pipe in. So that is a quote for the pipe. It is concrete pipe. That was That's what we kind of specified, and actually it was a little cheaper than the metal pipe because the cost of metal has gone up so high.
And the concrete pipe would be longer lasting in this application anyway, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Especially in yards when you have to deal with fertilizer and chemicals and stuff.
Any questions or a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. Joe, you're item 17 as well. We had asked him to get us bids on motor scooter Old Highway 51 two ways. One is just paving it with asphalt, the other with concrete. And I think those bids are in front of you.
Okay. So I took bids, okay.
I made that request, but actually right now, that request being made is gonna be totally out, I would say, not gonna be cost efficient to even do it, even though it's a long-term effect. Is that your opinion also, Mr. Lauderdale?
I believe it would be. That's right. Well, we got an excellent price on the paving, one thing.
Yeah.
And we got, that's a good price on the concrete, actually. But if you put take out all the numbers, you know, you need different things when you're doing a concrete street versus a asphalt street. A lot more involved in the concrete street, trying to get that poured and have trucks going in and out and driveways opened up where they can get out and give us time for the concrete to set up. But the bottom line was a concrete street cost about $80 a square yard, and the paved street is $27 a square yard. If you work out all the numbers in there and try to compare apples to apples then. So let's talk about the paving, I guess. So Lehman Roberts was low at $204,070, and that includes milling and overlaying motor scooter, repairing everything on Old 51, and then I had, dealing with the budget, I had them to give an alternate bid to be able to then come back and fully overlay Old 51 after we repaired it. So you're either looking at a number of 204,000, or if we do the whole thing, it's 282,000. So,
And do we need to do the whole thing?
well, it's certainly in the condition that if we have feel like we have the money to be able to do it all.
When will you have to inform him about the alternate bid?
Within 60 days of, about 2 weeks ago. So we still have another meeting or two.
So my question was, if we did, say like the first part of the bid and then do the second portion, he still would not allow us to go at that price if we didn't do it all on the first end? That's my question.
I can ask him.
Because we could approve that, and not gonna understand if you said if it was 30 days after completion of the other one that we hadn't made a decision, or 30 days before the completion or something like that. That he would still do the alternative on the street.
Okay. I can ask them if they'll,
We try to lock that price down.
Yeah.
yeah,
Try to
I'll ask
lock
them
it
if they'll
down
hold
at
that
the same time.
bid price for us.
I think we know at a minimum we want to do the 204.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we talking about the
Yeah.
alternate.
Yeah.
And what does the alternate entail?
The alternate then, where the 204, we come back and repair on Old 51, the bad spots. And then the alternate just comes in and overlays the whole street then after we repair it.
Does the 204 include overlaying motor scooter drive?
Yeah, completely
Okay.
rebuilding Motor Scooter Drive,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, 51 needs it too.
We get a lot of traffic on that old
Yeah.
Highway 51. It just,
Yeah.
there's a cut through.
It's torn up pretty
Yeah.
bad.
And you know, we're gonna do some drainage work, you know, you've gotten some quotes on that, so we've got to do some drainage work to get that water off the street, get it.
What would the life cycle be on this, on these streets once they're overlaid, completed?
7 to 8 years, 7 years, 8 years. That street's been like that. Of course, it's been needing to be repaired for the last 2 years, 2 or 3, but it's been there 12 years, 14 years. It's got a good base under it. I had that tested. And it only had 2 inches of asphalt, and we're gonna put 3 inches of asphalt, which is our minimum.
I think it'd potentially be a good practice in some way if we can begin tracking these overlays, that it can be more easily referenceable. I'm not sure how we could potentially do that so that
I think Lee can come up with a way to keep up with it for us.
if the board 12 years down the road or 15 years down the road is saying, well, when was the last time we did Motor Scooter Drive, they can look back and
That would be good.
because of something that we put in place
Yeah.
now, they could, yeah.
I have a list of every street we've done going back and when we did them, and of course, all that was done in the county. That was
Yes, sir.
all paved in the county before you annexed it.
Does anybody want to make a motion in reference to this item?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to accept the lowest best bid for Motor Scooter Drive, Old Highway 51, with asphalt from Lehman Roberts, $204,070.
Okay. And do we want to add anything referencing the alternate bid for the,
Well, I like Mr. Miller's idea to maybe come back in
Okay.
30 days and let us know what, if they'll hold that price or not.
okay. So the motion is to accept the base bid of $204,070. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That motion carries. Joe, will you get back with me as soon as you talk to them so I can let the board know about the alternate?
Okay?
Okay. You're up next with item 18, to authorize additional review of PEC sign and Miracle Home sewer easements. These are the sewer easements we're gathering up for the AWG sewer project.
Okay. I guess I'll tell you the bottom line first. After Stephen and I have talked, and the mayor and I have talked, we need to move forward with some legal work on these 2 easements that we need for the AWG sewer. It's not so much that the people are not wanting to do the easement. It's just, I don't think they understand about the ownership of each one of those pieces of property. So, Peck Sign Company didn't think they owned the property. MDOT's listed as the owner. MDOT says they don't own it. Mr. Peck passed away a couple of weeks ago. He may have been the only one that knew exactly if he owned it or not, so that's the situation on that one. And then on the Miracle Homes LLC, there's about 5 people involved in some type of ownership, as I can best figure out. legally, we're gonna have to look into exactly who's supposed to get paid, be able to get a legal document for that easement.
And so if we go forward with the eminent domain proceedings, the judge would probably tell us, go ahead and do your work, and we'll be figuring out who owns it, and you can pay them later. Is that kind of how that works?
I believe so.
And that way, we wouldn't be holding up the project. And we would still be paying these people the appropriate number of dollars and paying the correct people in the future.
Mr. Pittman, how long would it take to get that process started, and when can we expect to proceed?
Well, I can speak from here. I met with Mr. Lauderdale on last week, maybe Wednesday. We discussed what steps need to be taken. If you approve those, we need to take those steps, we get started right away. I think the first thing to do would be to try to contact the Peck family, and contact the owners of the Miracle Homes LLC and see if we can't get some kind of understanding. It would be easier if they would agree, obviously, to sell the property to the city without having to go through the domain. So I'd like to spend a little time, some time doing that. And then if that doesn't prove to be fruitful, then we can start the legal proceedings.
And I guess the next question would be, is since it is dealing with that major project, how much time would you require before you would go to the eminent domains? Because one thing about it,
We might want to start that at the same time.
I just finished saying, we might want to start it because we can always stop the process.
Absolutely.
But we need to start the process even while we're in negotiation with them, because that can always be stopped when you have and especially since a person has died, that means this stuff had not been probated yet. And that could be sometime next year in 2022 before it's probated.
Absolutely.
So we could be doing a dual parallel thing. You in negotiation and then at the same time proceeding with the eminent domain. If we give you that direction or not.
If this board wants to approve me to proceed right now with eminent domain and also make efforts to determine who owns it and negotiate that, we'll do that.
Yeah, I think that's the most prudent way to
Yeah.
do because of what we got to do.
Anybody like to make a motion?
So move.
Second.
All right. There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That motion passes. Okay, we had talked we're on item 19 now. We had discussed at the last meeting about a business up on Green Tea that is installing an 8-inch water line, and we would like to explore upgrading and paying for the upgrade to get a 12-inch water line for our future use as a city, so we don't have to double dip and spend money to lay a 12-inch line next to an 8-inch line a year from now. So we were trying to figure, I think we sent the attorney and Joe back to figure out a legal way that this board could do that if they so desired. So, Stephen, would you like to speak to that? I know you've done a little research on it.
Well, the simple, quick answer is that it's legal to have the property owner pay for what would be equivalent to an 8-inch pipe on public property, and for us to upgrade to a 12-inch pipe at the city's expense, and then for the city to own the entire piece of property and the improvement of 12-inch pipe. That's clearly legal under the law. So that's the first question. I guess that's kind of the only question that I was tasked with, and I researched it, and that seems pretty clear.
So this board could come up with a number that they were willing to pay for the 12-inch line versus the 8-inch, and then agree to purchase those improvements from the person who's already installing the line after they're installed.
As I understood it, the one private entity would pay the equivalent of an 8-inch pipe.
Okay.
We would pay the difference for a 12-inch pipe. We would own the entire 12-inch pipe at a reduced price to the city and taxpayers.
And who would we pay the difference to, and how would that?
Whoever's doing the work on The private property owner would pay the equivalent of an 8-inch pipe. We would pay the difference between an 8-inch and 12-inch pipe.
And if that number is, I'm looking at you, Madam Clerk, but if that number's 86,000, then we get into bidding processes. I'm not sure how we would bid a portion of a job.
Mr. Lauderdale could probably speak to that
Yeah,
better than I
Joe
could.
Okay?
So, I think we'll have to research this. We could enter an agreement on the entire project for this water line that was needed by both the city and the private owner, and determine what we would pay for that line once it got put in place. And that payment would be tied to the difference in the cost of, well, I guess what we're talking about, an 8-inch line and a 12-inch line. Obviously, the whole project is going to cost a good bit more than what we're willing to pay for the line. But that would be determined on the front end as to what we would pay for it.
So I think we had seen a document presented by the company that's going to put in the 8-inch line saying 86,000 was the difference. And so if this board was agreeable to paying that difference to get that line put in, would you see us just making a motion tonight to purchase that entire line at a future date for 86,000?
Yes.
Okay.
For a number, whatever that number is.
As long as it appraises for
It was like 83,000.
83, okay.
Okay. And I've seen the estimate, it's way more than that as far as the cost to them. And if it costs more than they tell us it's gonna cost them, we still only pay a certain amount.
What we agreed to.
What we agreed
Okay.
to.
I think that sounds logical.
It sounds logical, but it sounds logical, but there again, don't you think it's something that we need to run through the state auditor? Because what sounds logical is a process reading they want quotes and bids. So what you're doing, let me finish, please. What we're doing, we predetermining doing something to circumvent the bid process by having an agreement in place for someone to do some work, then we pay them back a certain amount, which in theory, we have circumvent the bid process. So I'm asking a question because I think that's really a question that needs to, that's an auditor question, and anybody on the board, I hope that y'all see that.
I agree with you.
I mean, I'm really, because it's board owned.
So you're just saying getting a bid for the pipe and not necessarily the whole job, just the pipe?
I'm just, what y'all talking about tonight, you talking about having a pre-agreement that we're gonna pay $86,000. I'm just using the number, 83,000, 80,000, 50,000, whatever number you wanna use. The difference, which is clear in violation, based on what, even what we just talking about purchasing order, that we know that certain amounts you got to have bids and quotes. So what we're talking about tonight would circumvent that process. I don't care how you look at it. So it's almost, you know, that I'd rather have an answer on the front end than say I'm gonna do it now and then pay the consequence later.
Alderman Miller,
I'm just, that's the question.
no, that's fine, and I appreciate the question. I'm not trying to dodge the question at all. What I think sounds logical is the concept of getting more value. May I finish, please, sir?
Yes, sir, I'm finished.
More value, a better pipe to serve more citizens in the future, saving the taxpayers money, instead of having an 8-inch pipe and then putting a 12-inch pipe next to it. So I think that sounds logical. Now, the bidding process is a different question, and I think you're right on point.
Yeah.
So, you know, the private property owner was here last time. just gave us a number. I don't know how much explanation there was as what was behind the basis of that number. I think we should certainly explore whether or not the bidding process was exercised for that number. Does that help?
Not by him, but by the city.
Yes, sir.
He's not required.
Yeah, I don't know that we have to take his number. I think we should get a number through our normal process of bids.
I'm good with that. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You know, I think we should get Joe maybe to get us a bid on however many feet of pipe we need, 12-inch, and check out the lowest bid of the pipe. And that will save us the labor from having to install it.
But as far as the legal aspect of being able to do what we want to do, we can do it. And I think your point is well taken. It needs to be done with the proper bid process in place.
Could we not bid that project out and then have them, I don't know, gift us money back or some kind of way, or in the difference? Donate the money back, I don't know, whatever term you want to use.
Any agreement like that is proper as far as my research on
That may be a better way to do it.
Of course, if we go to bidding it, it's going to be a long process, and they want to be open in November. So it might be that we do what Alderman Robinson was just saying and ask Joe to bid the pipe, the 12-inch pipe. We buy the pipe and let that contractor install it. We're not circumventing any issues at that point.
Well, the time crunch issues, I wasn't considering, so
Right.
I know that throws a problem.
If we slow them down too much, I think they'll just say, we're going to put our 8-inch line in and keep moving.
That's very
Yeah.
true. So.
What do you think about getting bids on the pipe, Joe? On just the sections, they'll be 12-inch. You will know how many linear feet of 12-inch to purchase.
So it goes over $50,000, got a bid.
Right.
Under $50,000 quotes. So,
We could just call a pipe salesman pretty quick and get him to tell us if it's going to be under or over 50, and then bid it if we need to.
we can do that.
Okay? So I think this board could make a motion to authorize Joe to go out for bids or quotes on the 12-inch pipe. If y'all think that's the route we want to go. And all we're doing is accepting bids or quotes. We're not doing anything at this point. We would have to accept them when they come in. What do y'all think on that?
Do we want to do?
As long as we're following the procedures.
Yes. And here's what I think we're doing. I think we're trying to do the right thing. We have someone putting an 8-inch pipe in the ground. We know within a year probably we'll need 12-inch pipe. So it saves the taxpayers money if we can get it done now for a half the price of what it would be. So what we're trying to do is correct. We're just trying to make sure we do it legally. I think that's where we are.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion for Joe to get a quote or bid on the 12-inch pipe of however much we need for that project.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. Thank you, Joe. Next is to hire Missy Sansom as full-time animal control officer at the pay rate of $13.73 per hour.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. Next is the approval of part-time certified dispatcher Jade Grissom changing to full-time certified dispatcher at the rate of T4 pay.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That motion passes. Next is to accept the resignation of dispatcher Sarah Jeffords effective immediately.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. Number 23, to hire dispatcher Jessica Ward to fill the vacant position at the rate of T1 pay or $17.50 per hour.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. And next is to approve the utility adjustment docket.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. Next, I need a motion to go into closed session to discuss executive session for police personnel.
So made.
Second.
So motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. This meeting will now be in closed session. That'll give everyone time to leave and for us to meet our new employees who might happen to be here. If any of you are new employees who just got hired, if y'all wouldn't mind just coming up to the board and introducing yourselves.